this vehicle is one of the most disappointing premium tanks that Wargaming have released, in my opinion, having played it quite a bit compared to some of the other tanks in order to get the gameplay that I did for you guys today. And whilst this tank isn't innately terrible, it's not bad for the game, and certainly is, yeah, like, it's not gonna absolutely break the game, neither is it gonna make it worse, etc. It just doesn't quite seem to give you enough in terms of being a premium tank that I would want to purchase, that I would save for people to purchase, and would warrant the money that Wargaming are wanting you to spend in order to get this tank. And it is a tier 8 medium tank that is pretty much what you would expect from a Swedish medium / heavy hybrid. Think of the Tornvang. I think that's probably the closest that we could go when we look at this. So the Tornvang being the heavy tank for the Swedish line. So you can see here, this is kind of what we're trying to emulate when you look at a tank like the Leviathan or Leviathan. I don't even know how you would pronounce it, but it's kind of a combination of the hull armor, essentially like a kind of like a Kranvang style lower armor. With the pike nose, it has a big like lower plate which people can pen, and so yeah, you have like no armor with this thing really. In terms of the hull armor, it's very easily pennable by everything, so you like, if you're coming up against this thing, it would be very unlucky to actually bounce off of it if you're looking at the hull, so the lower bit of the vehicle. You do have the turret of basically the Tornvang, so whilst it is, you know, essentially okay, it features the same sort of turret, so you can get hold down with the tank. But in terms of its stats wise, it has 10 degrees of gun depression, which is okay, and certainly, you know, you can make that work. The turret can bounce a few shots when you are getting hold down, only showing your turret. It creates an issue whereby you're essentially trying to be a heavy tank that's hold down, using a tank that doesn't particularly have the heavy tank alpha, and fighting other heavy tanks which have better armor overall. And so it kind of makes this mishmash of a tank, and I think that that is the reason why I'm not particularly a big fan of the tank. It doesn't like directly follow any one specific area. It's trying to be a master of all, but master of absolutely none, and so that kind of is where the tank is let down, in my opinion. If they had made the turret slightly weaker, but they'd given it like some boost to the DPM, for example, maybe you would see this tank actually being a little bit more usable in certain positions. But it seems like because they have tried to make it an all-rounder as a mercenary vehicle, it doesn't suit any of them. And so in comparison to something like the Tornvang, this is much faster, but features that turret, so you can use it a bit more effectively. You're a bit faster, but you do sacrifice that 120 damage to be able to get 280 damage with 56 kilometers an hour top speed. And when you compare this tank to some of the other tier 8 mediums, so if we were to look at the British mediums, for example, and we go over to the Centurion 1, this tank has a more consistent turret, to be honest with you, and it feels much more usable. The DPM of the Centurion, although we haven't got any equipment in it, I'll actually drop some in here just for the sake of it. And let's drop in the consumables just as an overview, because I think it's important to showcase these tanks alongside the other competition that you're going to have, because it's all well and good like kind of looking at it in isolation, but let's drop in this crew. It's my light tank crew, but in terms of DPM, you're pretty much on par with the Centurion Mark 1, but of course, I feel like it doesn't quite get what you would hope for when it comes to its overall feel. It feels much more sluggish. It has 16.71 kilometers an hour top speed, so it's pretty much on par with the Centurion Mark 1. The top forward speed is slightly lower on the Centurion. You get more hit points in the Centurion by like 100. It's nothing major. But then with the Centurion, you get this good view range, like 523 meters of view range compared to the Leviathan, which has, what, like 486, so it's a substantial loss to the view range. And once again, I think the shape of this tank makes it slightly impractical, because having that fully, like, frontal mounted turret means that if there's a slight bump on the back end of the tank, it doesn't feel like you can get as good of the overall effective depression of this vehicle, because, you know, you're having to be over a much longer area, and you seemingly feel, because the turret is so low down, like the actual main armament of the tank is so much lower down than some of the other tanks in the game, like the Centurion, you can see the barrel is actually way higher than on the Leviathan, and so essentially, like, you don't get that overall, like, buff to having a taller turret to look over things, so you're having to go right to the top of a peak, and you can expose the hull armor of this thing, which makes it a little bit annoying. But to say that it is directly abominable compared to some of the other tanks in the game, I don't think is fair, but it doesn't quite fit what I would want from a medium tank. It just doesn't seem to feel like it's really doing the job of a medium tank in all regards. The reload of the tank is kind of annoying. So whilst this tank has 2,878 DPM, so basically the same as the Centurion, and has slightly higher alpha, having that slightly higher alpha means that the reload of the tank is increased, but it's increased to that range where it becomes less usable, less effective, because you're not chunking away people for loads of damage like you would see with, you know, a heavy tank that deals 490 alpha, for example, or like 400 alpha, like the Tornvang would. And so you can get in a shot, but to get the second shot in, it's just a little bit too long, because even if you go for a tracking shot on someone, it gives them the time to repair and pull back behind something before you can fire again. Whereas with, for example, the other mediums that do have a slightly lower alpha damage, you can see the Centurion has a 4.7 second reload time. So it's outputting essentially rounds a second quicker than the Leviathan. And so with that being said, like, you have that issue with the Leviathan compared to the other mediums, where it's in that weird range where often 280 damage is nice if you do have a super good reload. And we can see that with a tank like the NM116 Panzerjäger, which does have that 280 damage if I try and look over it. But the thing with this tank, albeit I haven't got a crew in this, is that once again, it will be, I can guarantee it will be that reload speed. So let's swap over that one and have a quick look. You can see the reload time under 5 seconds. This is kind of like the golden area for effective DPM on mediums, I think. Like, as soon as you start going over that, you start to get into the range where you're, like, dealing damage, but you're not getting in 2 shots as often, because people repair the tracks much quicker before you reload, so you can't get a second tracking shot in for the most part. And whilst you can do that, it isn't amazing in that department. So I think that that is definitely affecting the Leviathan. So that's kind of one thing, one reason why I'm talking about this. And I think it's an important thing to talk about when it comes to the premium tanks and obviously spending your money. This tank is actually relatively cheap out of all of the Valhalla tanks. It is 8,900, but of course, depending on the god that you've chosen for the season challenge that you've got, like the challenge that came along with Valhalla, you can get a 25% discount. So that would come down to around about 7,000 gold. So in terms of a premium tank for 7,000 gold, it's actually relatively cheap. However, it's still £25-ish, which is like $35, $30, something like that, depending on where you live in the world. I don't know what the conversion is or how much it exactly is compared to you, but it's around about £25-ish to purchase the tank when you've got a 25% discount. If not, it's more so like, what would it be, like nearly £30 to purchase the tank. And do I think it's worth £30? Absolutely not, to be honest, in my opinion. But of course you can make your own decisions. But can it work is the question. Yes, this tank can work, but it's much more difficult to make it work as a medium. Getting the assistance tracking damage is much harder, because you're essentially outputting 25% less rounds compared to the other mediums, who can track people essentially with an increased amount compared to you. And they're dealing basically the exact same DPM, so when they do lock someone down, they can deal more damage. So it's essentially you're losing out on that tracking assist, as well as actually being able to continuously farm people, whilst also not really gaining any armor for that. Like, you're not really gaining a whole lot, maybe some slightly extra speed, but is the speed really that much more beneficial compared to the other ones? I don't think so. So let's jump into a game. We've talked a lot about the tank, overall, my overall opinion of how it kind of plays. Penetration wise, you're absolutely fine with the premium rounds, but the standard rounds kind of suck on this thing. 208 pen, not particularly great for those tier 9 and tier 10 games you are going to get into. So let's jump in, let's see what it actually plays like, and yeah, I'll give you my opinion. So, jumping over into the game here, we have Kasserine. And Kasserine is both a good and a bad map for this tank. Like, there are places that you can go hold down and be able to use the armor, but there are also a lot of places that, dependent on how the battle goes, that is not possible. Like, you are not going to be able to do that. And so how can we make that work? How can we avoid those situations? And that is really where this tank suffers in the long run on a lot of maps, because not every map you can go hold down, and essentially that just means that you've got no armor in the games where you don't get the good map. So it's very map dependent as to whether or not you're going to find those good maps, those amazing maps, you know, the maps where you can find positions to go hold down. And whilst you can find positions on pretty much every map to go hold down, it often comes at a cost of not being in an effective area where you can actually deal lots of damage or make use of being the medium tank, and you're having to fight with heavies that, if they catch any amount of your hull armor, are going to pen you every single time. So you have to basically play it like a medium that doesn't have armor in matches where you can't use heals. That is basically how you have to play this tank. And you have to basically find teammates and play as a proper supporting tank. You are basically become the ultimate savior when it comes to helping your team. And so that's kind of how this tank generally plays. Now, this game is a really good showcase of like the upper end of what the Leviathan can actually do. It is a mastery game, just to spoil it for you guys. So it is a really good game. I played about, I think it was about 6 or 7 games in this tank. Most of them were very lackluster, where maybe I was dealing like 2,000 damage or something like that on average, with a bit of assistance, you know, chucking in 1,000 assist or maybe slightly higher. Some games where you know, it just didn't go well even at all. Some games where you did a bit more damage but you didn't get any assistance. So this one was a bit of both. Now, straight away we can come up to here. We can use this little rock in front of us to be able to go hold down. So you can see the Centurions going for us. This is where the heat rounds of this tank are very, very good. So the Carnarvon obviously got a pretty strong turret for a tier 8 heavy tank. Like, compared to the other tier 8 heavies, it's pretty decent. But you can see that the DPM of it is actually quite nice when you can find targets in the open, when they're like, you know, out literally sitting in front of you. The DPM, really good. But that doesn't happen that often. So whilst it might look like, oh my god, that was 1,000 damage in like no time at all, like, the situations where that sort of occurrence happens, where lots of people are kind of sat out in the open, doesn't happen very often. So we can't really make our minds up about the tank that easily and that quickly. Now, one thing to note there is, of course, because it is heat rounds that we're firing with this tank, if you're coming up against American vehicles, or basically anything with big tracks, because your standard pen is pretty weak at about 200, you can find that you can pen them with heat, but if it misses and hits the track, you don't pen because it gets absorbed. But if you fire standard rounds, which you would be able to go through the tracks with and it wouldn't get absorbed, it ends up that you wouldn't pen anyway because you're firing rounds that don't have the best penetration. So you kind of have to work around that. Now this game is going badly for our team. We're down by about 12% on hit points. But this is where we're going to have to start making a play. Now this is a bad situation. I've got 3 tanks in front of me and, well, 4 tanks in front of me actually. And we have a bit of a problem because there's no real teammates to support me. So I can't run away because there's too many of them. I can't really pull back because we're in an open position. So the only thing I can do is use the tank in a hold down location to try and avoid damage. And now this is where I have to rely on my team. I need my team to hit this 112. Otherwise, it is going to be curtains, the BZ, the mediums. They're going to push towards me. I'm making some bad plays here. We're not going for the lower plate there. We ended up hitting the top plate. I could have aimed better. And so, yeah, not ideal. But now we've got a BZ that's now pushing up. This guy is pushing up, so I want to go for the tracking shot on him. And there you go, we track him. But we don't quite reload fast enough to track him again where he can't hit us. So all I have to do now is essentially play ring around the rosy and hope that my teammate can hit this guy. And oh dear, there's another heavy that's behind me. Luckily we set the BZ on fire, but unfortunately leave him on 1 health, so our teammate has to finish him off. We've now got artillery pounding down and looking at me, so I'm like, no, 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 get the hell away from me. And now the Carnarvon that we were hitting earlier on has pushed all the way up towards us. So, what in the world do we do here? Do we push this Carnarvon? Well, I've got 415 hit points, so I could take a hit. But there are still 5 tanks on the enemy team. Well, 6 tanks on the enemy team. And so what do we do? Do we go after them? Do I push this guy, take the hit, and then go after the rest? I could do that. We could finish him off in 1 shot. But I want those hit points for what if we come up against another tank. And I'm just basically waiting for my teammate to come up from behind to flank this guy. It looks like the TD might actually do that. And in fact, the SMV does hit the Carnarvon there. So we save a bit of hit points here to be able to kind of move forward. There's a BZ down in the middle. But we've also got the artillery, remember, so I'm a bit wary not to go out into the open against the artillery because he's seemingly got it in for me in this game, which does happen. You have to kind of move with the punches. And there you go. That is why I didn't want to take the Carnarvon hit, because that allows us to take a 390 damage hit from the KV3 here. But what we do, we track the KV3, our teammates hit him. I'm going to get hold down. We go for another one, hit him again. Now we're only down to AP rounds, so we don't get any premium. We hit him again, and now we just keep pulling back and hope that my teammate can finish him off before this guy can push all the way around. And my teammate does exactly that. So, maneuvering around to avoid those damaging hits, really, really crucial to improve as a player. The Tiger P here, not looking at me, luckily. That could have been game over right there. But we're getting some assistance on that guy as well. And at this point, I'm thinking, okay, it's a Tiger P. That tank absolutely sucks. So, let's try outplay him. It's probably the only way that we're going to win, because we've got other tanks that are going to be pushing up from behind me. But at this point, I'm kind of a bit weary because there is a artillery piece who does go for me. Luckily, it misses. And now we've got another tank. He's pushing down. He's a one-shot. Let's get rid of him. Bye, bye, bye. Do not come for me. But we've still got a tank destroyer on the enemy team, as well as this Tiger P to deal with. So I can't quite crest the ridges here without exposing my hull armor, as the Tiger P is above me. So what can we do? So the Tiger P there, look at him. He's looking at me. He fires. Which, at that point, I should have actually gone out. But we have enough time to now cross over to here, which gives us a much better spot to actually go after the Tiger P. Because we can move up to this location right here. And we should be able to use the turret armor of this thing to land in a couple shots and not expose the hull armor at all really towards the Tiger P. So we're now fully reloaded. We have 280 damage. He has 250 health. He tries to move, and in that moment we do manage to take him out. We're going to get behind the rock to avoid the artillery, and now it's just simply the artillery left alive. Whew. That was definitely a sketchy game. There were definitely moments where we could have played better, especially when we were bouncing off of the BZ. And some of the other tanks that were kind of pushing towards us, the 112, I think it was a 112 anyway. But that being said, we kind of played in terms of movement wise, in terms of letting our team have the best chances of helping me out. You know, pulling back around, allowing the enemies, in order to take me out, they would have to fully expose themselves to my team. And so that's kind of where I think it's been beneficial now. I knew that the artillery was over here. There is a chance that he is going to try and move in this game. And yeah, that's definitely a thing. You can see here, speed of the tank. We kind of never really seem to get up to the 56 kilometers an hour. I mean, down a slope, yes. But kind of on that middle ground, not really. So you can see here, like, because we're going down a slope, we're at 56. But when you're on flat ground and you're actually trying to work your way up to 56, it doesn't seem to really do that well. Maybe because we're lacking in the power to weight ratio. But it's still not like diabolically bad or anything like that. Now, it looks like the artillery isn't over here, so I'm going to make my way all the way back around. I think he's going to try and escape through maybe going towards my base. So we make our way back that way. Damage-wise, we have done 4.7k damage. We've got 2,279 assistance. That is a pretty darn good game in a tier 8 medium. That's for sure. So it's kind of going to be a good game whether I get taken out by the arty at the end and my team finish him off. Like, we would have to make some horrendous misplays if we were to, you know, throw this game against an artillery, 3 tanks against 1. But at this point, I'm thinking maybe he's going to try and shotgun, like go down into the valley area, like into these gorges. I don't even know if you call them a gorge, a valley. I don't know. But either way, we're going to make our way down over to here and hopefully not get shotgunned by this guy. So whilst we do that, I'm going to make the high ground because we can proxy him if he's down in the valley. So proxy is essentially if you're really close to someone, it will automatically find them. Like, it will spot them because you're so close to them. That's, you know, you guys probably know that already, but for those of you that don't know what that means, it's essentially because you're so close that you automatically detect them. At this point, it's kind of just pushing forward towards our kind of cap circle. The artillery actually jumps into the cap circle, so that lets me know, okay, he's over right next to me. It looks like I'm going to be the one that's going to have to deal with the artillery piece. So where is he? Oh, we spot him. Auto aim, get the sensor lock, go for the shot. Unfortunately doesn't hit. Now the reason why I actually aim there rather than auto aim is because the center of mass would have been hitting the rock, so we had to kind of actually aim. Go for a shot here with the HE round, and this is where you can have a bit of fun. Land a second shot into this guy. He's now a one shot, and you can see me kind of showboating against this guy, making a bit of fun. And there you go, we just get up behind him. Bit of showboating, telling him absolutely not, stop focusing me for the entire game. And there we go, we come away with a victory. So, you guys probably like the fact that we managed to take out the piggy at the end. I know artillery don't get the best name. But we picked up 5,500 damage, 2,300 base XP. That is some pretty decent base XP numbers right there. About 7.8 thousand combined damage in a tier 8 medium. Really darn good game. I was very, very pleased. But the overall experience is definitely not this. And I don't want to ever say that the average experience is going to be there in the Leviathan. It definitely isn't. But it's a challenge. It's fun. But I was a bit disappointed because I thought I would really love this tank, and it just turns out in the gameplay wise, having kind of played it and kind of gone over the stats as to why that might be, which I highlighted earlier, I think it is a little bit disappointing. But it isn't bad. But is it worth £30? Not for me. I don't think I would be spending money on buying this tank. But if you enjoyed the gameplay, if you thought maybe you would like to try it, then go ahead. But for me, this is not the tank. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed today's video. Hopefully it was kind of a good overview as to like my thinking behind why this tank doesn't quite add up and that sort of thing. I think it is just simply the reload is just that slight bit too long, whilst not really gaining enough compared to the other mediums in the game that have that slightly better reload. So that being said, hopefully you enjoyed. Make sure to like it if you did. And of course you can check out some of the other Season Pass tanks and season related tank reviews that we've done recently on the channel. Have a look at those, see what you think. And I will see you in the next one. Have a great rest of the day. Goodbye.